Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is The Day of the Locust from 1975, which is not a creature feature, directed by John Schlesinger, starring Karen Black, William Atherton, Bo Hopkins, Burgess Meredith, Donald Sutherland, Jackie Earle Haley before he was Rorschach, a whole host of odd little character actors. The wonderful director William Castle of Tingler fame appears as a director. This is a film about Hollywood in the 30s, based on a novel. This film was recommended by regular commenter Last Unctives, because I had recently picked this up in an imprint sale, and wow, this is some film. Schlesinger obviously made British films like Billy Liar and Darling, then went to America and had a big hit with Midnight Cowboy. This film was not a box office success, even though it's about Hollywood, and as we know, Hollywood loves films about Hollywood. But this is the dark side of Hollywood, and that's probably being mild about it. How they actually thought this would be a smash hit, I'm not quite sure. It's one of these films. When I did my One Director 4 films on Jean-Pierre Melville, I talked about how my kind of least favourite was Les Enfants Terribles, because the characters are just horrible. Well, all the characters in The Day of the Locust are horrible, but what makes this film work is because they're still compellingly horrible, rather than just being horrible and you don't care. The characters in this are horrible, but they're compellingly horrible, if that makes any sense. I mean, this is a film, like I say, absolutely blew me away. I actually gave it 5 stars on initial rating, but it is a film that I probably will, well, I'll definitely be rewatching, because there's just so much stuff in it that it can be a little overwhelming. But it's one of those films that, I think it's quite fantastic, but I can perfectly understand somebody saying they absolutely hate it, and I wouldn't have an argument against that. It's almost 2.5 hours long. Does it need to be that long? Probably not, but as I say, Schlesinger to me has always been a bit messy, and not the most kind of disciplined director. But again, for this, it still kind of works. There is no real plot. Again, that might be a problem for people. It might be a reason why it didn't do so well. Again, the fact it's called Day of the Locust in the era of things like Phase 4 with ants and bees, bee movies about bees, and there's no locusts in it. So if you're a Roger Corman fan thinking it's a creature feature, it's not that either. So it kind of follows William Atherton's character, who, it's kind of unique in Hollywood, or films about Hollywood. It's not, he's not an actor coming to Hollywood, he's not a writer coming to Hollywood, he's not a director coming to Hollywood. He's actually just an artist who wants to work in the art department of Paramount, which is kind of unique. And he's staying in this little dive of a hotel. There's a crack in his living room, where instead of covering it up, he puts a rose, and that's kind of pretty much a fairly obvious metaphor for the whole point of the film. Again, this film is not subtle in any way, but in some ways that's good as well, as far as I'm concerned. And across the road, Karen Black plays this platinum blonde who lives with her father, Burgess Meredith, who's an ex-clown who is now reduced to peddling magic cleaning products around LA. Karen Black is, wanting to be a star, but is actual fact just a little extra. She gets excited and takes William Atherton and another friend, Bo Hopkins, who's basically like a cowboy stuntman extra, to cinema to see her film where she gets a line, and it's like an Alibaba film, and it's quite terrible, and she doesn't get many lines. Again, this isn't a story about successful people in Hollywood. This is the story about fringe people in Hollywood, and the people who think they're more talented than they actually are, or just clinging on by the fingernails to the Hollywood dream. But Karen Black could easily end up being in stag films, or ending up being in a brothel, as much as ending up being a star, with top billing on a marquee. We have Jack Earl Haley as a child, who'd also been Bad News Bears before he would grow up to be Rorschach in Watchmen and the terrible Nightmare on Elm Street remake as Freddy Krueger. He plays a character called Adore, who is the most toxic child actor you've ever seen in a film. With his blonde curly hair, it's actually kind of ambiguous whether he's a boy or a girl. In the novel he was a boy, but it's the most toxic child actor you've ever seen in your life. So again, it goes back to just about everybody in this film is a terrible human being, which again, as I said earlier, it's that fine line between these people are terrible but they're compelling, and these people are terrible, I'm just going to switch it off. Which again, if you say the latter, I wouldn't have an argument. There's some films that people say are terrible that I kind of go, yeah, I don't understand that because it's great. This one I can perfectly understand if you switch it off, because the people are just so terrible. And William Atherton's character, who wants to ingratiate himself with his boss, Richard Dysart. And Richard Dysart, again, he's the art director at Paramount, and he kind of takes Atherton's under his wing. He wants to see drawings of the Waterloo picture, directed by William Castle, which would have been an interesting film if that actually was a reality. He does his drawings for him, and then he ends up going to parties with Dysart, and it's stag films, and it's like really seedy stuff. And things happen later in the film that Dysart's kind of true colours come out. And again, this film's not subtle. The novel was written by Nathaniel West, who was a writer who died young, didn't write a lot of stuff, but he went to Hollywood, didn't have a great time. The guy who wrote the script, he was blacklisted. There's actors in the film who were blacklisted. So even this in the 70s and it's about the 30s, then obviously in between the 30s and 70s were the 50s, strangely enough. And the communist witch hunts and the blacklist. So there's lots of bit roles in this film by people who were blacklisted and people who had resentment towards Hollywood for not supporting them and betraying them. So the whole film is just this odd, strange, bitter, but ultimately quite fantastic portrayal of Hollywood in the late 30s. Donald Sutherland, again, we don't really know why he's there, but he lives in a house and he's very reserved. I should say he does play Homer Simpson. His character is called Homer Simpson. And as Kim Newman says in the extras, Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, always said that Homer Simpson was based on his dad, I think, but eventually he did say he read the novel Day of the Locust, so Homer Simpson is actually the Donald Sutherland character. And he's kind of has a Christian upbringing, doesn't drink, is very internal until the end of the film. And he, Karen Black get attached to him because he doesn't actually want anything like sexual from her, and he just puts a roof over her head essentially. And William Atherton is kind of in love with her. Bo Hopkins is in love with her, but she's just so shallow. She's only interested in marrying somebody who's rich, and as she puts, is criminally handsome. So again, she's a terrible person who thinks that she is going to be a star, even though it's fairly evident that she's not going to be a star. As I say, she's probably going to end up as something else. So you have this kind of love, almost rectangle. Again, Burgess Meredith as her father is just kind of, everybody gives wonderful performances as these broken, tragic, used up figures, or people who don't actually realise what their fate's going to be. And then we have an ending which almost tops all other 70s films endings. And if you know what a 70s ending is, this one is literally almost apocalyptic. It almost becomes a zombie film. It's almost, George Romero would be proud. So it's one of those films that even at 2.5 hours, because certainly I was like hooked into these characters, as terrible as they are, and it is fascinating. Again, it's one of those films made in the 70s, about the 30s, but with a lot of 50s baggage. LA Confidential, I think, is a huge, has a huge debt to Day of the Locust, I think. And it's another wonderful imprint release, again with alternate artwork. So this one you get a commentary by Kat Ellinger, who's always excellent. You get an interview with Kim Newman talking about Day of the Locust, and you also get an interview with William Atherton, which is really good and really in depth about the film. Obviously, William Atherton is more famous for being the guy who Bonnie Bedelia punches at the end of Die Hard. But his chat about the Day of the Locust is really revealing and quite wonderful, as he talks about the cast members and just the whole experience of the film. So again, it's an absolutely fantastic film that you should really see, but if you don't like it, I would not be surprised. It's a very thin line between stupid and clever, and it's a thin line between horrible people that you're compelled by and fascinated by, and horrible people that you just don't care about. So thanks very much for watching this random review of The Day of the Locust. Please let me know in the comments what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.